Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. We are so excited to have the co-founder and CEO of Health World Online Incorporated joining us here today. Jim Strohecker joining us to talk more about the e-health and e-wellness and all that he does and his company. Excited to see you. How's everything?
It's a great, slightly rainy California day.
Oh my goodness. But you know what?
But not cold. I
Isn't it
understand you're probably
amazing?
really cold out there.
It's amazing. I know. Yeah, we're in New York, but you know what? It's okay. We're gonna get through it. We're fine, and I'll just be envious of your weather. So, tell us a little bit about what it is you do, Jim, before we get started.
Yeah, right now with Health World Online, which is basically almost in its 30th year, we've been sort of pioneers in e-health and e-wellness, very, very early on in the game, where we got to experience the wild west of the very, very early internet. Now what we're doing, our primary focus is on wellness, particularly on whole person focused wellness. And we also train wellness coaches to be professionals working in various capacities. And we work with a lot of institutions, universities, corporations, we work with the military, spas, and a whole range of organizations that early on we had no idea would have the slightest interest in wellness back 20 years ago when we started the wellness piece of it.
Amazing. Well,
So
do
we
you?
have a good time.
Well, I can't wait to find out more, but can I also just get a little bit of your background? I was reading about how you got your start, and tell us a little bit about that because it's always good to get to know the man behind the company, right? Before we get into all the amazing work and services and wellness that the training that you do, would you mind just giving us a little overview?
Sure, sure. So actually going back to my college years, I was just sort of, moving through college in a normal sort of professional trajectory and began to have a bit of a shift. And I was in studying cultural anthropology and
Mm-hmm.
archaeology, and had an opportunity when I was 20 to go on a couple of archaeological expeditions to Mayan ruins in the jungles of the Yucatan, which I have to say was quite an adventure, quite an eye opener. And having that period of time just to sort of hang out in the midst of living in the jungle in the midst of a ruined civilization really gave way to lots of really pondering and deep thought. And I sort of emerged from that uh, with just a whole new perspective on life and a real interest in human potential and really how are we wired as human beings, and what are our potentials to be able to grow and evolve. And that really took hold and sort of carried me through my entire career. But it was a little unanticipated.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. I see the wellness inventory behind you, and there's so much that you and the company do. Let me just ask for today's show, what did you want to focus on about, obviously the work you're doing with Health World Online and how it's helping so many?
Yeah, I think we could start with our wellness program itself, and
Yes.
the real core of it is the whole person model, and that's really the magic of the whole thing. And the fascinating thing about this is that this wasn't something we just cooked up out of our imaginations, last week. This was actually the oldest wellness model going back almost 50 years. That was developed by my good friend Dr. John Travis for the first wellness center in the U.S. that was featured on 60 Minutes back when no one had any idea what this new word wellness even meant. So it really has a long history, and and really captures what I consider really to be the core of what it means to be human.
Yep. Wow. And what is it? What is it? Tell us.
Well, it's interesting because often when people are looking at models of sort of wellness or growth, we sort of think like nutrition and diet and exercise and stress, and then often pretty much there it just sort of falls away as just not a lot to stand on.
Yeah.
But really working with a whole person model, and this actually interestingly sort of goes back all the way to the original definition of health from the World Health Organization when they said
Got
that
it.
health is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease and infirmity. And the last part of the definition is really like the disease model, which
Yeah.
we're also used to, sort of like sort of like it's an on-off switch. Either you're sick or you're well. And often when we're told we're well, we're just like right on the edge. You know, we
Yeah.
really don't have a lot of you know a lot of stuff to work on in terms of being, I mean, a lot of energy to be able to carry forward. We may just basically be barely well. So this model sort of looks under the hood, so to speak, of what it means to be human at 12 fundamental life processes, things that every human being does on a daily basis. But we don't really think of it in any way. So we might sort of consider ourselves, well, I have a physical body, that, I'm trying to keep relatively healthy if I can. I have a mind and I have some emotions that are sort of troublesome,
Yeah.
but most of us have a fairly basic view of what it means to be human. As we begin to look at the basic things we do as human beings, like, for example, when a baby is born, if you look at the wheel
Is
here,
this the 12 fundamental, how do I
yes,
say it? Components or
yes, exactly.
okay, thank
And,
you.
and it starts with self-responsibility and love, which is sort of like the atmosphere with which in with wellness occurs. Because with self-responsibility, we're taking responsibility for our own well-being, so that we have the energy to live a full life and to meet all the obligations we have: personal, professional, family, social. And we're not putting ourselves always second, because once we do that, we we begin to lose sight. We begin to, maybe get a little exhausted or get on a trajectory that can take us to burnout. So we really need to learn skills of how to self-manage. And the very next dimension, breathing, is probably the most important of all of the dimensions in this regard. And of course, breathing is getting a lot more press these days, but 20 years ago, it was rare to talk with anyone unless they'd been to a yoga class who had ever done any sort of conscious breathing. Uh, Basically, people would say, "Well, you have to breathe, right? Why would I bother to pay attention to it?" And we refer to it as the reset button. It's because as you're doing self-regulated breathing, which you can do at any time, just beginning to take slow, deep, diaphragmatic breaths, we begin to shift from what's called fight, flight, freeze, or the sympathetic nervous system, where we're sort of on alert. And we often, in our modern culture, we're so stressed, we stay there a lot of the time. And that's not a very productive place to be. And it shifts us to parasympathetic, which is called rest, digest, and restore. And this is where you're able to be, more present, your mind is clearer, your emotions are more stable, and there's so many physiological processes that are benefited by being in this more relaxed state. And as a matter of fact, I've just launched a new course that focuses on the impact of
Yeah.
breathing on the whole person across all 12 dimensions. It was sort of a big learning experience for me to recognize truly the breadth of how breath affects us. And then thinking on another level, when a baby is born, in order to survive on this planet, the very first thing a baby has to do, baby has to breathe.
Breathe.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
it doesn't survive. And what happens, the very last thing we do, we take our last breath. We expire. We stop moving. We stop eating. Our senses start fading, and eventually we take our last breath, and that's when we pass on away from this plane. So breathing is very profound, and we might have up to 2 billion breaths in a lifetime. So I sort of joke that it really makes sense to make a friend of your breath, so that you're using it, because
Yeah.
it's with you every step of the way, every step of your life, and there's so much you can gain there. And then as we go through the rest of the wheel, we have sensing. We sense our outer environment with our five senses. We eat. Sometimes we don't make the best choices, but this is how we power our system. We move our body, and sometimes we don't move enough, or we're very immobile. And this has become like a big issue for sedentary living. So we're wanting to find more ways to increase the level of physical activity throughout our day. And we have affect or feeling. We experience thinking, and sometimes our thinking really gets us into trouble when we get into a lot of negative thinking or cyclical thinking, where we're not really cultivating like a positive attitude and a positive mindset that's able to keep us growing. And then as we go through the rest of the dimensions, we play and we work, try to develop some balance there. We communicate our thoughts and
Wow.
feelings with others. We experience intimacy, and not just sexual intimacy. We talk about 12 different types of intimacy that people can experience with friends, families, significant others, colleagues, to develop a wider network of
Yeah.
trust and intimate friends. And then we search for meaning in our life. And often when we sort of lose our sense of meaning, we get a little adrift. When we reconnect with what really fires us, what's our real why, it's almost as if we can move mountains. And finally, the final life process we call transcending. And this is where there's on three levels. We overcome obstacles, simple obstacles in our life.
Yeah.
We sometimes, when we're getting more in tune, we might enter a flow state, and lots of professional athletes and entertainers and others, actually quilting is a great example of being in a flow state where you're
Ah.
just totally absorbed in an activity you do really well, doesn't require a lot of your attention, and you can really just like, Michael Jordan was sort of like the perfect example of like entering a flow state when he used to talk about it. And there's a great book called Flow by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, a positive psychology pioneer. And then finally, it's the spiritual dimension of our lives, whatever that might be for us. And for the most part, these 12 life processes are sort of on autopilot. We do them all day long,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not really aware of them. And I like to refer to it collectively sort of as a human operating system that, like, like with my iPhone, I know it has an operating system, and if I get a message saying my iOS needs to be updated, I go, sure, well, I'll do it that night. But we don't really understand that we have an operating system,
Yeah.
and when we don't understand that, there's not a lot we can do with it. But as we become more aware of these 12 life processes in our life, we're able to begin to make small incremental changes that begin to make some real difference in our lives. And we have so many different options and opportunities to work with. Maybe one person really wants to focus on getting more physical activity. Another wants to bring more play in their life so that they sort of help to deal with their work-life balance. For someone else, it might be eating. For someone else, it might be searching for meaning. For someone else, it might be de-stressing. So they try some breathing techniques. And as we begin to bring awareness, then
Yeah.
really everything is possible. But before we have awareness of that, uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's just difficult. And often what happens, like I might be in a company and I'm told, your department is going to have an emotional intelligence training. So I take that and I learn a lot about my emotions and other people's emotions and have a much more skill in that area. Or I might take a communication workshop and get the same thing. But we never see that they're connected. They're just like different silos of activity. And
Yeah.
with the wheel, what one begins to recognize is that everything is interconnected, everything influences each other. So, for example, if I'm doing a breathing technique or self-regulated breathing, I might notice that my sensory awareness is really heightened. And at the same time, if I've been anxious or have something going on emotionally, I notice my emotional state is much more calm. And at the same time, my mind becomes really focused. And I sometimes joke that, this is like a drug ad but you're having multiple positive side effects instead of negative side effects. And so it really makes it much more simple for people where they might focus on something like one specific life process and do a simple self-care practice or technique. And they begin to notice, wow, this is having impact all the way around the wheel. This, you know, this is really worth my time. I'm really getting a lot of
Yeah.
bang for my buck, so to speak. So a lot of it is just being able to see the context and see the connection. Because if we don't have a context, we don't really like. If I could breathe and say, "Wow, I feel very peaceful," and that's great, but it's sort of vague. But if I can say, "Wow, my emotional state, my mental state, my sensory awareness
Wow.
is really improved,"
Yeah.
there's a big shift.
All right, so this is the wellness inventory we're talking about today. It's licensed to universities, nursing schools to use in curriculum and organizational wellness programs, health and wellness coaches, the military. This is amazing, right? Seriously, and this is developed now back in 1975, right? We said
Yeah,
the wellness
the
pioneer
original,
John W. Travis.
yeah, the original wheel, wellness wheel, and the assessment around it was created like about 50 years ago. And so we've worked with Dr. Travis, updated it, and created a whole program around it and a certification training for coaches. And the coaches just love it because as they're going through the training, they're getting their own transformation because for the first
Yeah,
time in their lives, they're becoming really aware of themselves from this really holistic perspective of these 12 life functions. And they begin to experience a lot of growth and transformation in their life. And after they've had that, then it's easier for them to
yeah.
work with people and to sort of guide them through like their own process.
Got it. So the wellness inventory certification training has been around for over 20 years and really helping, as you mentioned, this to transform that whole person, approach in a sense. And these coaches are amazing. I just want to mention here that you are NBHWC approved training program. Tell us what else you're eligible for, just so I can get the facts out as
Yeah,
well
sure.
before
So
we
when
continue.
someone,
This is exciting.
yeah, as we're an MBHWC approved training, that means
Hmm.
that anyone who completes our full level one, level two certification training is eligible to register to take the exam to become a national board certified health and wellness coach. And the certification has been around for around 8 years. Really, it was the entire coaching industry working together, the wellness coaching and health coaching industry to create the certification and the credential. And it's really what's being recognized now, from everything from the corporate to healthcare to the insurance companies and government as being sort of the gold standard, for health and wellness coaches.
Got it. Well, thank you so much. And we're going to continue talking here about more of this whole person wellness model and, of course, how it's helping so many. And just want to once point out again, Jim, you're joining us live today from Penn Valley, California, from Health World Online. And we are just ecstatic. I mean, this is fascinating. If you could see the wheel, if not, you're going to have to watch the show to see it directly. And let's talk more. I know about the whole person approach and how it's helping people and these coaches and intact helping you and I, everyone, as around the world, which is awesome.
Yeah. And hey, should it would be helpful to actually show the wheel on the screen?
That would be amazing. I love when you show and you share. So, yes, we always encourage that. Let's do that. Let's bring it up for those here on the live podcast. Beautiful. Here's the human operating system and describe it for those just that on the radio side. Beautiful.
Yeah, so there's 12 life functions, or we often call them dimensions, in the wheel. And we refer to this as the human operating system because this is something we all do every day, but we just tend to do it on autopilot. We don't have to think to breathe or to sense or have to put a little thought into eating and moving, feeling, thinking. Often all of this just happens automatically. And but that sort of keeps us in a position where we're just sort of putting one foot ahead of the other. But in order to really grow and maximize our own potential to function more effectively and to have just live more fully, uh, it's really helpful to become aware of these life processes. We have self-responsibility and love, which is referring to really being responsible to yourself, knowing when to set your boundaries, taking care of yourself so you can take care of your responsibilities and take care of others. And then we have breathing, the most fundamental thing we do as a human being. Sensing, this is how we sense our outer environment. And also we have a set of interior senses, one which is called exteroception, which is our ability to sense inside of our body. That's like our gut sense, our ability to know that I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. We eat, and we focus a lot on becoming more mindful in terms of how we eat, but not only what we're eating, but also how we eat, eating more slowly, chewing more thoroughly, allowing yourself to digest better, eat less, and just have a more efficient eating experience. Moving, which entails all of our physical activity and as well as our rest. the feeling, the whole range of our emotional life, thinking, the whole range of our cognitive life. And in both of those, a lot of us in our culture, there's lots of challenges around depression, anxiety, which also really affects our thinking as well. There's a lot of people who complain about negative thinking or just repetitive thinking, or I can't turn off my mind. The next dimension is playing and working, really that balance of work and play. And play is really a great way for us to regenerate. Communicating, being, improving our communication skills so we're really clear when we're speaking with people about what our intentions are, and also how we talk to ourselves. When we think about, like, if we screw up or something happens, what is it that we say to ourselves? And often you'll notice, man, I wouldn't say that to my worst enemy. We really can be pretty tough and unkind on ourselves. And that's another thing that really helps in the wellness process, a little bit of self-compassion. And then intimacy, a whole variety of ways we can expand our circle of intimacy with friends, family, colleagues, and significant others. Finding meaning, our search for meaning in our life, and really what's most important to us and what really drives us on a daily basis. And then transcending, which is the overcoming of obstacles, being more in a flow state, where you're sort of in the zone, and also the spiritual dimension of your life. And as you look at this, imagine a newborn baby. The very first thing that a baby needs to do when he comes out of the womb, baby has to breathe.
Breathe. Yeah.
And immediately the baby is sensing this new environment, the people, the sounds, the bright lights, begins to move its arms and legs and fingers and toes, begins to have affect or a feeling, might be pensive, might be smiling, might be crying, begins to have cognitive processes based on the sensory experience, begins to attempt to communicate with the mother. As soon as the mother picks up the baby, that bond of intimacy is really reestablished. And as soon as the baby's hungry, the baby eats. And this might be the first 3 minutes of life or 2 minutes of life where all of this is happening. And we do all this as human beings all the time, but it's sort of like the fish in water. We don't notice our breathing unless for some reason, someone says, Jim, take a deep breath, take a deep breath. I know you're stressed. Or we go to a yoga class or we're learning meditation or stress reduction. But as we're introduced to these various life processes, you'll notice that there's almost whole industries developed around all of these. But everybody's jumping in, like going into like this one thing, like eating or communicating, and like it's a silo that exists by itself and is not connected to anything else. And that's the real beauty here. I mentioned a little while ago. I'll just show
Sure.
a slide where imagine someone is, I gave an
Ah,
example of someone doing a breathing practice. And then they notice at the end, when they look at the wheel, wow, my sensory awareness has increased, my anxiety just disappeared, and my negative thinking and my overactive mind is really calm and focused right now. And it might be more as well. But the wheel gives us a context to see what's happening when we're doing something positive for ourselves. And in the same way, if something negative is happening, we're under a tremendous amount of stress, we might notice that we're barely breathing. And our senses we might be like the horse with blinders because we're so stressed. And we're sort of mindlessly eating or impulsively eating. And we might find our emotional state is really constricted. And we're having a lot of reactive thinking and a lot of reactive communication. So it's fascinating to watch how positive and negative environmental influences and our own internal influences impact our overall well-being as what we're seeing on the wheel. So the wheel just becomes this really neat process or just a model that you can sort of see yourself and notice like when you're on and when you're off. We actually have an assessment. That's what the wellness inventory is actually the original name of the assessment that assesses individuals in all 12 dimensions or all these 12 life processes. And it's fascinating because people usually for the first time in their life get a snapshot of themselves from a whole person perspective. And things they'd never ever considered before. Like someone, as I mentioned earlier, would say, why would I think about my breathing? You
yeah.
have to breathe. What a waste of time. But when you begin to explore, you realize, well, this isn't a waste of time, because actually this is
Mm-mm.
probably the most powerful tool I have to influence me on so many different levels. And each of these life processes is sort of its own pathway to transformation. We say it doesn't really matter where someone enters
Love
the
it.
wheel,
Yeah.
wherever they're most interested or wherever they have the highest motivation. And they'll find that everything is influencing everything else. So you find yourself sort of moving around the wheel. College students find this particularly fascinating. A lot of universities use the wellness inventory program, I mean, the assessment and the program
Yeah.
itself, where they do a pre and post assessment. Each week they focus on a different dimension of wellness and have assignments.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's part of a regular course, sometimes it's its own dedicated course. And the kids just are so appreciative of the skills they're learning to control their anxiety and so many other things in their life. And often will say, wow, I'm learning things here I can take with me for the rest of my life. Why doesn't anybody teach us this in kindergarten? Because it's not that complex. And actually
Yeah.
kids can get this pretty easy. It's actually fun for them. But the older we get and the more sort of stressed and entrenched we get, in our ways, we get a little inflexible. So this helps us regain a little bit of that flexibility and recognizing that, just like with the whole idea from neuroscience, that uh, we can we can change, our brain can change, we can rewire, we can wire new neural pathways, we can change our behavior at any time of our life. Whereas before it was
Yeah.
sort of perceived that we were sort of fixed.
Mm-hmm.
I am the way I am, and that's fine. I'm not going to make a big deal about it. But now we recognize how much we can grow and change, and that's not only personally but
And reduce
professionally.
stress, build
Yeah,
resilience, maybe have a better work-life balance, and create the life that we want.
absolutely, absolutely. So for someone, it might be focusing on the spiritual dimension, or it might be, as you said, might be bringing more intimacy into their lives because they may not have a significant other, and thinking, oh man, I don't have any intimacy, and recognizing, wow, I've got all these people that I play sports with, I hike
Yeah.
with, my
Mm-hmm.
friends, we read books together, and other friends, we go to art museums, and we have our own unique bonds of intimacy around our shared love of whatever it is we do. And so there's a lot of richness out there that we often already have in our lives, but we don't even recognize it, or don't give it maybe the importance that it
Beautiful.
deserves.
All right. Well, we got to remind everyone. I want to thank you for being here and talking about this again. Bodymindspirit.com. You can go there. This easy online program can really improve the whole you, reduce that stress, balance your life, and monthly coaching. There's so much that we can find out about. So tell us all the ways we can reach out to you again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and if they click on coach training on that page up at the top, that's how they get to the coach training. And otherwise, they can learn more about the 12 dimensions on the wellness inventory.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you here. So, bodymindspirit.com. Do you want to share a phone number or any social media pages as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to get to me would be Jim at bodymindspirit.com, or they could call me at 530. Let me give you a cell so someone texts
Sure.
310-493-2311. And someone can see I was in Los Angeles before for about 35 years. So,
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. Pleasure having you back here. And great show today. Thank you for sharing the screen as well. And great to reconnect with you. Thanks so much.
Jill, my total pleasure. Thank you so much.
You have a great day. And to all of our listeners and viewers, stay tuned. We'll be right back with more.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.